Imagine waking up, right, and just realizing the fundamental architecture of reality has quietly shifted under your feet overnight.
It's completely changed.
Exactly. We are talking about a morning where uh, artificial intelligence hasn't just passed some standard benchmark tests,
Right.
but it has secretly unraveled the absolute highest echelons of postdoctoral mathematics. I mean, math that literally dictates the laws of physics and, the security of global cryptography.
Yeah, the bedrock stuff.
And on that exact same morning, we're talking about the crowning of the very first human trillionaire.
Which is just wild to even say out loud.
It really is. A morning where rogue cancer cells are being dismantled by these molecular demolition crews at the genetic level, while simultaneously, and this is the part that gets me, the U.S. government is quietly staking out secluded ponds for hovering unexplained red spheres that violate every known law of aerodynamics.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
Welcome to June 13th, 2026. Today's show is an inspiring celebration of impossible ideas and the minds brave enough to chase them down. Finding passengers bold enough to embark on our good ship's journey is harder than most people think.
It really is.
So drop a very humane thumbs up right now to send a signal flare to drifting knowledge pirates like yourself. We know they're out there. Let's bring them home. We're keeping it lighthearted as usual, but we promise to never skimp on the intelligence. Now, let's kick off this voyage with today's new revelations.
Let's get into it.
So, we are pulling our source material today from the Innermost loop, which is curated by Dr. Alex Wisner-Gross.
An incredible collection of data this week, honestly.
Unbelievable stuff. And our mission for this deep dive is to essentially map the absolute edge of the event horizon. We are analyzing this highly localized point in time where this speculative fiction of the past decade has just abruptly hardened into our waking reality.
It's not fiction anymore, it's Tuesday.
Right. And we need to examine exactly what happens to, global economics, to human biology, and to the fabric of geopolitical power when pure, unadulterated intelligence becomes literally the cheapest yet most ruthlessly guarded resource on the planet.
And that guarding aspect is happening right now.
Exactly. So to start, we have to look at this unprecedented legal maneuver that, frankly, sounds less like a regulatory filing and more like a containment protocol.
A quarantine, almost.
Yeah. So Anthropic's flagship AI models, Fable 5 and Mythos 5, they were just hit with this abrupt U.S. export control directive.
Which is huge.
Massive. Citing severe national security risks, the government basically forced Anthropic to instantly suspend foreign national access for hundreds of millions of users.
Hundreds of millions. Just cut off.
Overnight. And Anthropic is out there aggressively disputing this, of course. They're claiming that a, quote, narrow jailbreak doesn't justify a recall of this magnitude. But, a recall of a localized intelligence model is a fundamentally different beast than recalling a microchip or a piece of physical hardware, right?
Oh, absolutely. It requires a complete reimagining of what an export control even is in the first place.
Right.
Because historically, if you wanted to control the proliferation of a strategic asset, say, weapons-grade uranium or specialized semiconductor fabrication equipment, you monitor the physical supply chains.
You track the trucks and the boats.
Exactly. You track shipping containers, you audit manufacturing manifests. It's physical.
Yeah.
But when you apply an export control to a digital model like Fable 5, you are attempting to draw a geopolitical border around an instance of pure replicable logic.
Which is invisible.
Right. You are policing the flow of weights and parameters. And Anthropic's defense, that this was merely a narrow jailbreak, implies that a user simply found a highly specific, confined semantic vector to basically bypass the model's safety alignment.
Just a little glitch in the wording.
Exactly. But the severity of the U.S. government's reaction tells a totally different story. They aren't treating this like a software bug. They're treating the underlying cognitive architecture of Fable 5 as an acute, weaponizable national security threat.
And I am extremely skeptical of Anthropic's narrow jailbreak defense here anyway. If I look at the collateral damage, the implications go way beyond just patching a safety filter.
Oh, for sure.
Dean Ball made a brilliant observation in the source notes. He pointed out that because Anthropic's non-U.S. engineering staff can no longer legally interact with or optimize these models, this directive has accidentally functioned as the world's first regulation on recursive self-improvement.
Yes. That is such a critical point.
Right. You've just benched a massive percentage of the global workforce capable of steering this intelligence.
And that is the critical paradox of this whole regulatory action. I mean, recursive self-improvement is that theoretical threshold where an AI becomes adept enough to write the optimization algorithms for its own successor.
Basically upgrading itself.
Right, compounding its capabilities without human intervention.
Yeah.
Now, up to this point, that optimization loop has been heavily guided by human researchers.
Yeah.
Specifically, a highly international cohort of top-tier mathematicians and computer scientists working at these labs. So, by enacting the sudden national security blockade, the government has basically severed the model from its global human caretakers.
Which is just so ironic.
The irony is profound. In their attempt to lock down the technology and prevent it from acting autonomously in the wild, they have inadvertently bottlenecked the human-in-the-loop development cycle.
Yeah.
If the human engineering pipeline is suddenly restricted by nationality, the pressure naturally increases to allow the AI to just automate its own debugging and architectural improvements.
Which obviously accelerates the very autonomous loop they are so terrified of in the first place.
Exactly.
But let's get to the real reason I think the government panicked, because I really believe it has absolutely nothing to do with a narrow semantic jailbreak.
I think there's more to it.
Oh, definitely. I think it has to do with what these models have been quietly achieving in the background while we basically weren't looking. The sources outline this completely wild sequence of events involving Epoch AI.
Right, the benchmark stuff.
Yeah, so they shipped version 2 of Frontier Math, which is supposed to be the ultimate benchmark for computational reasoning, right?
The hardest math test on Earth.
Exactly. But to get version 2 ready, they had to run an AI audit on the original test itself. And the AI found and corrected errors in 42% of the problem.
Almost half the test was wrong.
Which is insane. But once they actually had a mathematically sound test, the scores just exploded. So GPT 5.5x high hit 85% on tiers 1 through 3, and its tier 4 result rocketed from an abysmal 35% up to 73%.
A massive jump.
Massive. But the real shocker is that before the lights went out on Fable 5, before the ban topped the entire board,
Oh, yeah?
87% on tiers 1 through 3, and an astonishing 88% on tier 4. Plus, just for good measure, Fable 5 apparently completely one-shot the first open-source MMORPG.
Just autonomously.
Right. It autonomously navigated a massively multiplayer online role-playing game from start to finish.
We really need to contextualize what Tier 4 mathematics actually represents here, because calling it a math test is a gross understatement.
Right. People hear math test and think calculus.
Exactly. They think of high school.
Yeah.
But we are not discussing multivariable calculus or, the standard differential equations you'd encounter in advanced engineering. Tier 4 represents the absolute frontier of theoretical mathematics.
The edge of the map.
We are talking about unsolved conjectures in the Langlands program. We are talking about topological quantum field theory and complex lattice problems that actually form the bedrock of post-quantum cryptography.
Wow.
So the fact that the original human-authored test contained errors in nearly half of its problems, that is the ultimate proof that human mathematicians had basically reached the limits of their cognitive capacity to even formalize the questions correctly.
We couldn't even build the measuring stick. We were giving the AI a broken ruler and then wondering why the measurements were off.
Exactly. We literally had to utilize a frontier AI simply to audit the human logic so we could accurately measure the capabilities of the next generation AI.
That is just a wild loop to be in.
It is. And when that clean measuring stick was finally applied, we realized Fable 5 was operating at an 88% success rate on mathematical proofs that elite postdoctoral human researchers might dedicate an entire decade to unraveling.
And it does it in seconds.
Well, there's actually a note from a researcher in the sources pointing out that this perfectly explains why these AI systems had recently felt, quote-unquote, slow at generating outputs.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they were not struggling with the processing. They were quietly cracking open fundamental underlying theorems.
Wow.
The mathematics weren't solved yesterday. They were solved months ago, and we just lacked the diagnostic tools to even realize it.
I look at that and I just think about the sheer strategic dominance it implies. It's like we built a race car so fast it broke the radar guns we built to track it.
That's a great way to put it.
We were standing on the track, tapping the glass on the radar gun, thinking the car had stalled, but it had already finished the race, parked, and redesigned its own engine.
Yeah, it was already on the next generation.
Right. And this brings me back to pushing back on Anthropic. Because if I am the U.S. government, right, and I discover a private tech firm possesses a digital entity that can simultaneously crack the lattice cryptography problems that secure global communications, And Ryan autonomously beat an open-world MMORPG.
Which requires a completely different skill set.
Exactly. It requires long horizon planning, complex resource allocation, and dynamic adaptation to unpredictable variables. If I see that, I am absolutely not pulling the plug because of a safety glitch.
No, of course not.
I'm pulling the plug because the tactical advantage of that model is roughly equivalent to possessing the atomic bomb in 1945.
And that realization right there is driving a massive geopolitical fracture in how the rest of the world responds.
Because everyone is seeing this happen.
Right. And the observer notes in the source material capture this divergence perfectly. Europe's reaction, predictably, seems to be a total failure to grasp the paradigm shift.
As usual, tech regulation, unfortunately.
Yeah. The expectation is that they will likely throw another few billion euros at a localized robotics or maybe an image generation startup, fundamentally playing a game that ended in 2023.
They are regulating and funding the output, not the foundation.
Exactly. But China, conversely, is described in the sources as becoming entirely, quote, AGI-pilled.
They see the writing on the wall.
They do. They're actively restructuring their entire national macroeconomic strategy around the singular pursuit of artificial general intelligence. China looks at an 88% success rate in Tier 4 mathematics and understands that whoever controls the foundational intelligence essentially controls future physics, advanced material science, and the architecture of global financial markets.
But, and this is the big but, keeping that foundational intelligence running requires pulling it out of the theoretical realm and grounding it in brutal physical reality.
The physical layer.
Yes. You cannot run a singularity on a whiteboard. You have to plug it into the wall. As much as we conceptualize artificial intelligence as this ethereal cloud, it is entirely dependent on steel, silicon, and a terrifying amount of raw electricity.
It's extremely physical.
Which brings us to the actual physical bottleneck of this entire revolution, and that is infrastructure and energy.
Because the physical build-out required to sustain this level of compute is just staggering. And it's currently colliding headfirst with the limits of our existing infrastructure.
We're hitting a wall?
A massive one. Let's return to Europe for a moment, specifically their bet on supply chain sovereignty.
Okay.
Infineon is opening a massive 5 billion euro, so roughly 5.8 billion US dollars smart power fab in Dresden on July 2nd.
That's a huge facility.
Huge. And it's backed by €1 billion in subsidies from the EU CHIPS Act.
Yeah.
But the critical distinction here is what they're actually manufacturing.
Right.
They're not fabricating the logic chips. They aren't making the GPUs or NPUs that actually perform the mathematical calculations.
Well, really, what are they making then?
They are fabricating the power semiconductors. They are building the specialized hardware required purely to manage, regulate, and step down the massive electrical loads required to feed these AI data centers without literally melting the motherboards.
Wow. It's the ultimate unglamorous necessity.
Exactly.
And the human economic distortion this creates around these physical hubs is wild. Like, look at what the sources say about Samsung's factory town of Dongtan.
Oh, the real estate boom there.
Yeah. It has transformed almost overnight into a luxury hotspot.
Oh.
We are talking about these localized microeconomies where property prices are just soaring and department stores are seeing massive hauls, all driven entirely by the windfall bonuses from AI hardware manufacturing.
Yet, for every Dongtan experiencing an economic boom, there is a massive wave of grassroots resistance halting progress elsewhere.
The pushback is real.
It is fierce. The sheer physical footprint of these data centers is triggering a severe backlash. The sources document that in the first quarter of this year alone, local opponents successfully blocked or delayed at least 75 distinct data center projects.
Just in the first quarter.
Just in Q1. We are talking about $130 billion worth of capital infrastructure completely stalled.
That is mind-blowing.
That is the highest quarterly block rate since tracking began in 2023. And the grassroots organizations coordinating these blockades, they have more than doubled.
Yeah.
They've reached 833 groups spread across 49 states.
See, I want to frame this with a gold rush analogy, but like a modernized one. The old cliche is that the people who got rich in the California gold rush were the ones selling the shovels, right?
Right.
But in this AI rush, it isn't just the people selling the silicon shovels. It's the people selling the heavy-duty power cords, the industrial cooling fans, the miles and miles of copper wire.
Yes, the foundational infrastructure.
Exactly. But the problem is local municipalities are realizing that $1 billion data center doesn't bring thousands of local jobs to their town.
No, it's mostly automated once it's built.
Right. It brings a giant, humming concrete box that basically drinks their municipal water supply for its cooling towers and consumes enough gigawatts to destabilize their local power grid.
It is a profound structural tension.
Yeah.
And, without delving into the political morality of either side, the logistical reality is just stark.
It's impartial math at this point.
Exactly. You have trillion-dollar technological ambitions colliding with municipal realities where residents are primarily concerned with whether their local grid can support air conditioning in July without causing rolling blackouts.
A very valid concern.
Very valid. But the grid isn't the only physical limitation. The architecture of the intelligence itself is hitting physical walls. The bottleneck is no longer just acquiring the silicon chips. The bottleneck is the physics of orchestrating them.
Right, and the SpaceX example in the sources perfectly illustrates this. So SpaceX actually ended up handing over the full compute capacity of its Memphis Colossus 1 to Anthropic.
Which was a surprise to a lot of people.
Yeah, and the reason why is fascinating. SpaceX's internal teams hit a complete wall trying to train their own AI, Grok, across 3 different physical campuses.
They tried to split the load.
They did, and they were defeated by latency and what the sources call aging network walls. And I really have to push you on this because it sounds absurd on the surface. We are talking about SpaceX,
I know, the irony.
a company that routinely orchestrates orbital mechanics, right? They dock capsules with the ISS, and they land booster rockets on autonomous drone ships in the middle of the ocean.
Literally rocket science.
Exactly. How can a company that masters orbital physics struggle to network a few data centers together? How hard is this orchestration problem, really?
It is arguably one of the hardest engineering problems currently facing humanity.
Wow. Really?
Because you are literally fighting the physical limitation of the speed of light.
Oh, right.
When you are training a frontier AI model of this size, you are not just running separate tasks on separate computers. You are executing synchronized gradient descent across tens of thousands of GPUs simultaneously.
So they all have to talk at the exact same moment.
Every single calculation must be perfectly synchronized.
Yeah.
If those chips are distributed across 3 distinct campuses, the data must travel through physical fiber optic cables.
Okay.
Now, even traveling near the speed of light through silica glass, that physical distance introduces latency. We're talking delays measured in microseconds.
Which sounds tiny to us.
Right, to a human, a microsecond is nothing. But when you require absolute synchronization for parallel processing, a microsecond delay across a massive network causes the entire training run to stall out.
The chips just sit there.
The chips sit completely idle, burning massive amounts of power, simply waiting for the packet of data to arrive from the campus 10 miles away.
That is crazy.
And then add in the inevitable packet loss and signal degradation from, aging physical network switches, and the orchestration becomes computationally impossible.
So they just gave up.
SpaceX realized that the physical distribution of their compute made it useless for training Grok at the scale required, so they handed it to Anthropic.
Because Anthropic probably had a different approach.
They likely possessed a different architectural approach, or they simply needed the raw compute for localized inference. So, answering user prompts rather than synchronized training.
So the only solution for training is to basically cram as much compute into one single massive physical location as possible to eliminate that speed of light delay.
Bring it all under one roof.
But the second you cram 100,000 GPUs into one building, you run right back into the energy density problem we just talked about. You melt the local grid.
Exactly.
It feels like an unsolvable physical trap.
It is a trap, and it's dictated entirely by energy density. Every single bottleneck we've discussed so far, whether it's the 833 grassroots groups fighting for their local power grids or the network latency caused by having to spread data centers out, it all ultimately reduces to one immutable constraint.
How much power you can pack into one spot.
Precisely. How much raw power can you physically store and discharge within a confined spatial footprint?
Which perfectly sets the stage for the breakthrough in the next section of our sources, because that specific energy ceiling may have just been shattered.
This is where it gets really exciting.
Yeah, the source material highlights a milestone in aviation, but the underlying technology is the exact key needed to unlock the AI gridlock.
The solid-state breakthrough.
Right. So test pilot Miguel Iturmendi recently flew the Helios Horizon, and this is the very first crewed fixed-wing aircraft powered entirely by solid-state batteries.
Which is a huge milestone on its own. But the critical metric to analyze here is the 410 white H kilograms.
Watt-hours per kilogram.
Exactly. Watt-hours per kilogram. This is the specific energy density, which is the measurement of how much raw electrical energy a battery can store relative to its physical mass.
Right.
Hitting the 410 Witogram threshold represents a staggering 60% leap over the absolute maximum capacity of the traditional lithium-ion packs that currently power everything from our smartphones to our electric vehicles.
To put a 60% leap in perspective, I wouldn't even compare it to the jump from dial-up to broadband.
No, it's bigger than that.
It's more like the transition from vacuum tubes to transistors in early computing. It doesn't just make the existing system slightly better, it fundamentally alters the physical architecture of what is actually possible to build.
That is a much more accurate structural analogy. To understand why this leap is possible, we really have to look at the chemistry for a second.
Break it down for us.
So traditional lithium-ion batteries rely on a liquid electrolyte. It's essentially a chemical soup that allows ions to flow back and forth between the cathode and the anode.
Okay.
That liquid is heavy, it is highly flammable, and crucially, it is susceptible to forming dendrites.
What are dendrites?
Dendrites are these microscopic, needle-like structures of lithium that grow inside the battery over time.
Like little stalactites.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
And if a dendrite pierces the physical separator between the anode and cathode, it causes a short circuit and catastrophic thermal runaway.
A fire.
A very intense fire. So to prevent this, lithium-ion batteries require heavy, bulky graphite anodes and extensive safety casing. It adds a ton of weight and takes up space.
Right.
Solid-state batteries completely eliminate the liquid. They replace it with a solid electrolyte, typically a specialized ceramic or a sulfide-based material.
Hence, solid state.
Exactly. This solid barrier physically blocks the formation of dendrites, which means you can abandon the bulky graphite entirely and just use a pure lithium metal anode.
Wow.
That fundamental shift in the chemical architecture is what allows you to pack significantly more energy into the exact same volumetric footprint while simultaneously reducing the risk of fire to near zero.
So for aviation, that 410 Wei-Curie metric is the magic number where the battery is finally light enough and power dense enough to sustain flight without the aircraft essentially just being a massive flying battery with no room for cargo.
Right, it actually becomes a useful airplane.
But if we pivot this back to the data center problem we were just discussing, this is the silver bullet for the AI energy gridlock, isn't it?
It is the exact enabling technology required to decouple the compute from the immediate constraints of the local power grid.
Because they can just store the power on site.
Precisely. If you possess a battery architecture that can store 60% more energy in the same physical footprint without the fire risk, data centers can deploy massive solid-state battery banks directly on site.
Next to the servers.
Next to the servers. They can slowly and steadily draw power from the local municipal grid during off-peak hours. So overnight, when demand is lowest, store it densely in these solid-state arrays, and then discharge it locally to feed the AI models during synchronized high-intensity training runs during the day.
So the city doesn't even feel it.
It entirely bypasses the acute grid spikes that cause rolling blackouts and trigger those municipal blockades we talked about.
I think if you're listening to this, you really have to apply that 60% leap to your own immediate reality.
Think about your daily life.
Yeah, imagine if every piece of hardware you interact with, your phone, your laptop, your car, suddenly possessed 60% more power capacity without gaining a single millimeter in thickness or an ounce in weight.
It changes everything.
It completely rewrites our physical relationship with energy. But as we master this physical hardware, and as our energy storage becomes exponentially denser, we inevitably turn these massive computational tools toward the most complex, poorly understood hardware system on the planet.
The human body.
The human body. Which brings us to the next section.
And this brings us to a really profound inflection point. We are transitioning from viewing human biology as a stochastic lottery that we simply endure to viewing it as a programmable substrate.
An engineering problem.
Exactly. An engineering problem that can be mapped, optimized, and actively edited.
And the economics of this transition are moving way faster than the regulations. Let's look at the medical tourism data in the sources.
This is fascinating.
China is rapidly scaling up as a global hub for CAR-T cancer therapy. They are offering this highly advanced treatment for around $150,000.
Which sounds like a lot, but...
For context, in the United States, that exact same therapy can run up to $475,000.
Almost $500,000.
Right. And the repricing of advanced immunotherapies is a massive geopolitical and economic lever.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, CRRT therapy, which stands for chimeric antigen receptor T-cell therapy, is inherently complex.
It's not a pill you just swallow.
No, Not at all.
Darn.
It requires extracting a patient's own T cells, transporting them to a highly specialized facility, genetically modifying them using a viral vector so they produce receptors that specifically target cancer antigen,
That's incredible.
and then expanding those cells by the millions and infusing them back into the patient. Historically, this has been a highly bespoke, artisanal laboratory process.
Handcrafted biology.
Basically, yeah. So the fact that China can offer this at a fraction of the U.S. cost implies a massive leap in bioinfrastructure. They're likely transitioning from bespoke manufacturing to automated AI-optimized bioreactors,
Just scaling it up.
effectively turning a boutique miracle cure into an accessible, scalable commercial product.
But while scaling CAR-RT is an incredible logistical feat, the breakthroughs happening at the very edge of genomic research are making even CAR-RT look like a blunt instrument.
Yeah, CAR-T is just the beginning.
Right. The sources highlight the New York Genome Center's work with something called SATAG, and they are simultaneously profiling the transcriptome, chromatin, and histone marks.
Which is incredibly difficult to do all at once.
And they are using this data to model something called molecular asynchrony, which maps how cell identity decays as we age. Now, I want to avoid treating this like a middle school biology class.
Sure, let's keep it high level.
If we are talking to an audience that understands system architecture, how exactly is SecTag profiling all of these biological layers simultaneously? And what exactly is molecular asynchrony?
Okay, to understand SATAG, we have to look at the transition to multi-omics at the single-cell resolution.
Multi.
Right. Previously, if researchers wanted to understand a cell, they had to choose one lens. They could run RNA sequencing to look at the transcriptome, which tells us which genes are actively being transcribed into messenger RNA.
Okay, so that's one layer.
Or they could use techniques like ATAC-seq to map chromatin accessibility, which tells us the physical folding structure of the DNA and which regions are physically open for transcription.
Layer 2.
Or they could use ChIP-seq to look at histone modifications, which are the chemical tags that regulate gene expression.
So you had to pick one.
You had to pick one, and you couldn't get a full picture of a single cell at one moment in time. CTAG represents a massive methodological breakthrough because it allows researchers to capture all three of those distinct data layers from the exact same single cell simultaneously.
Oh, wow.
It provides a unified, multidimensional map of the cell's regulatory architecture.
So it's kind of like the difference between having 3 separate out-of-sync satellite images of a city, one showing the roads, one showing the traffic lights, and one showing the cars.
Yes, exactly.
Versus having a real-time, unified 3D simulation of the entire transit system all at once.
Precisely. And that unified simulation is what led to the concept of molecular asynchrony.
Okay, so what is that?
Well, aging is not dictated by a single biological clock or just a single genetic switch that flips. It is a statistical decay in the entropy of regulatory networks.
It gets messy over time.
Right. In a young, healthy cell, the chromatin accessibility, the histone tags, and the resulting RNA transcription are perfectly synchronized. It is a highly optimized control loop.
Everything fires when it's supposed to.
But as the cell ages and accumulates environmental damage, these layers fall out of sync. A region of chromatin might open, but the corresponding histone tag is missing, causing the RNA transcription to fire late or misfold.
Like an engine misfiring.
Exactly. That loss of synchronization is molecular asynchrony. The cell slowly loses its defined identity because its internal regulatory networks are no longer communicating efficiently.
That makes total sense.
SIGTAG provides the diagnostic resolution required to see exactly where that timing goes wrong, which is the foundational step required to eventually reverse it.
Because if you can map the precise decay of the control loop, you can theoretically engineer a way to reset the timing.
Exactly.
But that is diagnostic. The sources also highlight an incredibly aggressive, offensive application of this biological engineering.
The CRISPR stuff.
Yes. The Innovative Genomics Institute just utilized a specific CRISPR system, CRISPR-Cas12a2, to literally, quote, shred the chromatin of cancer cells that harbor a mutated p53 gene.
Shred is a strong word, but accurate here.
And the crucial detail is that they achieved this while entirely sparing the surrounding healthy tissue.
This represents a structural paradigm shift in oncology. The significance hinges on the role of the p53 gene.
Okay, what does p53 do?
In molecular biology, p53 is classified as a tumor suppressor protein. It's often referred to as the guardian of the genome.
Sounds important.
It's vital. When a cell sustains DNA damage, p53 initiates a cascade that halts the cell cycle, allowing for DNA repair. Or, if the damage is irreparable, it triggers apoptosis, which is programmed cell death.
It's the ultimate failsafe.
It is the failsafe. However, in roughly 50% of all human cancers, the p53 gene itself is mutated. The failsafe is disabled, allowing the damaged cell to proliferate uncontrollably into a tumor.
So half of all cancers rely on this specific structural flaw.
Yes.
And this new CRISPR-Cas12a2 system targets that exact mutation. You know, when I read the word shred, my mind initially went to a sniper analogy, but given what you just explained about system architecture, that feels almost too simplistic.
A sniper implies just taking out one thing.
Right. Traditional chemotherapy is like carpet bombing a city to take out a rogue faction. You just hope the targets die before the city collapses.
Collateral damage is huge.
But this Cas12a2 method sounds more like identifying the specific load-bearing pillars inside a corrupted building and executing a targeted demolition while leaving the buildings next door completely untouched.
Your targeted demolition analogy is structurally perfect.
But how exactly does it pull off that level of targeting without off-target effects?
Oh, the mechanism of Cas12a2 is distinct from the more commonly known Cas9. When the Cas12a2 complex is programmed with a guide RNA that perfectly matches the sequence of the mutated p53 transcript, it enters the cell and begins searching.
Okay, looking for the mutation.
Right. In a healthy cell with normal p53, the guide RNA finds no match, and the Cas12a2 complex remains completely dormant. It does absolutely nothing.
It just floats there.
Exactly. But when it enters a cancer cell and successfully binds to the mutated p53 RNA, the binding triggers a conformational change in the Cas12a2 protein.
It wakes up.
It basically unlocks and activates a collateral cleavage activity. It becomes a non-specific nucleus, rapidly degrading any single-stranded DNA and RNA it encounters within that specific cell.
Oh, wow.
It literally shreds the structural integrity of the cancer cell's genetic material from the inside out, inducing immediate catastrophic failure, while the healthy cells next door remain entirely unaffected.
It literally weaponizes the cancer's own mutation against itself.
It's elegant and brutal at the same time.
It is. But I have to push back on the timeline and the economics here.
Okay, fair enough.
If half of all cancers share this p53 flaw, the science points toward a functional cure. But looking at what we just discussed with CART therapy, where it still costs $150,000 in China and nearly $500,000 in the US, are we actually looking at the beginning of a universal cure? Or are we just looking at a new, ultra-exclusive frontier of medical tourism?
That's the big question.
Right, like a world where the cure definitively exists, but only for the demographic that can afford to orchestrate custom CRISPR vectors.
That is the defining ethical and economic challenge of this era. I mean, the scientific barrier to functional cures is rapidly falling, but the economic barrier to biological orchestration is immense.
It's the new bottleneck.
Yes, exactly. The translation from a localized triumph at the Innovative Genomics Institute to a globally deployed, democratized treatment will not be dictated by the chemistry. It will be dictated entirely by the economics of scale and the automated biomanufacturing infrastructure.
Which perfectly illustrates how we are not just repricing human health, we are fundamentally repricing the real world.
Everything is getting a new price tag.
Everything. We are watching the complete overwrite of physical constraints by algorithmic optimization, which brings us to the repricing of infrastructure, labor, and the very concept of the workforce itself.
This is where it hits home for a lot of people.
Let's start with the physical infrastructure. California just activated a $33 million smart freeway project near Temecula.
I saw that.
Instead of spending billions of dollars and years of labor pouring new concrete to add physical lanes, they are utilizing advanced algorithms to meter the on-ramps and dynamically set speed limits based on real-time data flow.
This is a profound example of substituting physical capacity with algorithmic efficiency.
Replacing concrete with code.
Exactly. For the last century, urban planning operated on a simple heuristic. If you have congestion, you build more concrete capacity.
Just add another lane.
Just add a lane. But concrete is highly capital intensive, geographically constrained, and honestly environmentally devastating.
Yeah.
California's Smart Freeway project is an acknowledgement that the physical architecture of the highway might actually be sufficient if the behavioral flow of the agents utilizing it is perfectly optimized.
If we just drive better, or let the algorithm drive better.
Right. By implementing algorithmic flow control metering exactly when vehicles merge and dynamically adjusting speeds to prevent those compounding shock waves of human braking.
The ghost traffic jams.
Exactly. By stopping those, they are replacing physical infrastructure with code. It is the real-world application of the intelligence cost curve dropping to near zero.
And we're seeing that exact same algorithmic substitution principle being applied to entire national economies.
The Switzerland example.
Yes. Look at the upcoming vote in Switzerland. They are voting on a referendum to strictly cap their national population at 10 million people.
Which is unprecedented.
Now, setting the inevitable political noise aside, because we're just looking at the data, the sources characterize this as an implicit wager. They are essentially betting that an advanced automated economy can continue to scale its GDP and prosper without relying on continuous demographic growth to supply labor.
Evaluated purely as a macroeconomic experiment, it is a fascinating premise.
It really is.
Because the fundamental equation of modern economic growth has always tied GDP expansion directly to population expansion.
More people, more money.
More humans equal more labor inputs, more consumption, and greater economic output. But if artificial intelligence, robotics, and algorithmic flow control can seamlessly absorb the labor demands, ranging from logistical supply chains to high-level data analysis, then a nation might theoretically decouple its economic prosperity from its demographic footprint.
They don't need a massive workforce anymore.
Right. Switzerland is effectively asking, if the autonomous systems execute the labor, why do we need to aggressively expand our physical housing and infrastructure footprint to support a larger human population?
But this brings up a terrifying reality for the humans who are currently here trying to enter that workforce.
The transition period is going to be rough.
Very. And this leads us right into the computer science degree paradox highlighted in the data. The numbers show that job postings for junior developers have actually increased by 47%.
Which sounds great at first.
Right, but yet actual hiring for those exact positions has plummeted by a staggering 73%.
It's a complete collapse.
If you are a junior dev listening to this right now, you are probably wondering why you just spent 4 years agonizing over data structures and algorithms. How is this ghost job phenomenon happening on such a massive scale?
Well, the collapse of the entry-level pipeline is a direct structural consequence of the AI capabilities we discussed earlier, like Fable 5.
It's doing the work.
It is. The divergence between postings and hiring is driven by a few factors. Companies often leave job requisitions open to project aggressive growth to their investors or simply to harvest data from resumes.
Just keeping the illusion of growth going.
Yeah, but the true collapse in actual hiring occurs at the point of execution. When an engineering manager needs basic, boilerplate code written, the exact type of work historically assigned to a junior developer, they face a new economic reality.
A completely different cost structure.
The cost of assigning that work to a junior dev, waiting for them to write it, and then having a senior engineer review and correct it, it is now significantly higher than simply having an AI model generate the architecture instantly for fractions of a cent.
So they just don't hire the junior dev.
The AI has completely hollowed out the bottom rungs of the skill ladder.
So the entry-level job basically doesn't exist, but you are still expected to possess senior-level strategic skills to get hired.
You have to skip the first 5 years of experience.
You are no longer paid to execute the code. You are paid to orchestrate the AI that writes the code and to mathematically verify that the machine isn't hallucinating.
Exactly. You're a manager on day one.
But even the massive tech conglomerates are hitting the limits of this automated exuberance. The sources note that Meta just had to issue an internal directive capping AI token usage for its own staff.
They had to cut themselves off.
They did. They are actively steering their engineers toward an internal, presumably smaller tool called Metacode. And they did this because internal projection revealed that allowing their staff unconstrained access to their frontier AI was going to cost them billions of dollars this year in sheer compute overhead.
This perfectly highlights the brutal economics of inference.
Break that down for us.
We spent a lot of time discussing the massive energy and compute costs required to train an AI model. But inference, which is the computational cost of the model actually generating an answer every time a user prompts it, that scales linearly with usage.
Every prompt costs money.
Exactly. When you deploy a massive frontier model to tens of thousands of engineers, every single query requires a vast matrix multiplication across those GPUs.
And that burns power.
A lot of power. Meta, a company with near infinite capital and world-class infrastructure, ran the projections and realized that the energy density and compute bottlenecks we discussed earlier make unconstrained inference financially unsustainable, even for them.
Even for Meta.
The intelligence is incredibly capable, but the electricity and silicon required to instantiate it on demand remain profoundly expensive.
And the irony is just staggering to me. We build an omniscient, god-like oracle, but it is so computationally expensive to talk to that Meta has to literally ration its use.
It's like having a supercomputer you can only turn on for 5 minutes a day.
Right. Meanwhile, on the corporate side, you have a massive, prestigious consulting firm like KPMG releasing a highly anticipated report on AI adoption, and it turns out the report was entirely padded with bogus case studies built on AI hallucinations.
Oh, that was a disaster.
The humans were too lazy to proofread the output of the machine they're supposed to be managing.
It completely illustrates the inherent danger of treating a predictive model as an objective truth engine.
Which they aren't?
No, they are architected to predict the most statistically probable sequence of tokens based on their training data. They are designed for eloquence and plausibility, not necessarily factual verification.
They're built to sound smart.
Exactly. So when humans abdicate the role of critical orchestration and blindly trust the output, you get high-level corporate reports citing companies and case studies that literally do not exist.
But, as much as we struggle to map and control reality with our advanced algorithms and our concrete code, there are still physical phenomena in our world that completely, utterly defy our models.
Yes, the anomalies.
This leads us to the most jarring juxtaposition in the source material: the unexplained frontiers and the trillion-dollar valuation.
This part is wild.
It is. The Department of War just released a third tranche of roughly 72 UAP files, unidentified anomalous phenomena.
72 files.
And these are files where the government explicitly states they cannot definitively explain the physical objects captured by their own advanced sensor arrays.
The cognitive dissonance of this moment in time is what makes it so fascinating to me.
Oh, so?
Well, on one side of the ledger, humanity has successfully engineered models capable of mapping the molecular asynchrony of the human transcriptome, and autonomous agents capable of outsmarting the cryptographic bedrock of mathematics.
We feel like masters of the universe.
We possess a profound mastery over our digital and biological domains. Yet, on the other side of the ledger, the Department of War is publicly releasing documentation of physical objects operating within our airspace that flatly violate the known parameters of aerodynamics, thermodynamics, and mass.
We don't even know what we're looking at. Like, one of the files they spotlighted is a Navy memo dating all the way back to 1948. This memo warned that a cycle of, quote, flying discs looked set to recur and pleaded for observers to report sightings immediately. One of the analysts in the notes posed a brilliant question. If the Navy has been internally tracking a recurring cycle of anomalous craft since 1948, how does the release of this memo not already constitute full disclosure?
I mean, they're admitting they've been tracking a pattern for nearly 80 years.
We've had internal acknowledgement of a pattern for nearly 80 years. And it's not just historical archives. The White House itself just highlighted an FBI clip showing a bright red sphere hovering exactly 25 feet up in the air.
Which is incredibly specific.
And the New York Post reported that officials managed to trace the trajectory of these specific orbs to a single, secluded pond. And now the FBI literally has agents physically staking out this pond, waiting for the spheres to return.
Evaluated entirely without speculation, the shift in the institutional posture is remarkable.
It's completely different now.
We have transitioned from decades of systemic denial, obfuscation, and the stigmatization of pilots to a posture of open, albeit bewildered, observation.
Bewildered is the right word.
The fact that federal agents are staking out a pond for anomalous red spheres is a profound admission that our most sophisticated sensor arrays and our most advanced AI models still cannot parse the totality of the physical universe.
They represent a gap in our knowledge.
These UAPs represent an absolute edge case. Whether they are highly advanced adversarial drones deploying novel physics, unrecognized atmospheric phenomena, or something else entirely, they operate outside the bounds of our current scientific modeling.
It is the ultimate humbling mechanism right at the moment of our greatest technological hubris.
A reality check.
But while the FBI is staking out pawns for red spheres, the global financial markets are aggressively pricing in exactly who they believe will orchestrate this new era.
The markets don't wait for answers.
They really don't. The culmination of all these colliding trends, the AI intelligence leaps, the demand for extreme energy density, the aerospace logistics, all manifested in the SpaceX IPO.
A historic IPO.
SpaceX debuted on the NASDAQ, the stock immediately popped 19%, and they raised a record $75 billion. This places the company at a staggering $1.77 trillion valuation.
Trillion.
With a T. And Wynne Shotwell, the COO, dropped a massive hint about a potential structural tie-up with Tesla, casually mentioning that it, quote, might make Elon's life a little easier.
The market's valuation of SpaceX is a masterclass in recognizing foundational infrastructure.
It's not just about Mars.
This IPO is not a valuation of a company that just builds rockets.
Right.
It is the market rewarding the ultimate orchestrator of the physical world.
Right, look at the assets.
Exactly. SpaceX controls the Starlink network, which is rapidly becoming the low-latency global data nervous system. They possess massive orbital-scale compute orchestration capabilities, as we saw with the Memphis Colossus one.
And if they combine that with Tesla?
If they formally integrate with Tesla, they are combining advanced robotics via the Optimus platform, autonomous navigational AI, and unparalleled global battery and energy storage logistics.
They own the entire stack.
The market is pricing SpaceX as the foundational monopoly of the new automated spacefaring economy.
And the raw mathematics of that IPO means humanity has crossed a historical threshold. The float pushed Elon Musk's personal net worth to $1.05 trillion.
Wow.
He is officially the world's first trillionaire. He currently commands more concentrated wealth than the next 5 richest people on Earth combined.
$1 trillion in personal liquid asset control is a metric that defies normal economic contextualization.
You can't even picture it.
You can't. It represents a concentration of resource allocation and geopolitical leverage that rivals, and in many cases exceeds, mid-sized sovereign nations.
He's basically his own country.
Economically, yes. It is the purest financial manifestation of the singularity curve we have been analyzing. When intelligence scaling and energy density become exponential, the financial rewards captured by the entities capable of orchestrating those inputs become entirely exponential as well.
It really forces me to think about a specific comment left by a reader named Michael Emicangelo, which the author of the source is highlighted at the very end.
What did he say?
Michael simply wrote, "Science fiction is cooked."
Well, he's not wrong.
And I have to ask you, looking at this specific week in June 2026, we are discussing the mechanics of brain uploads, the crowning of a trillionaire, AI autonomously solving postdoctoral physics and dismantling an MMOPG, and the FBI physically staking out UAP pawns. Has the velocity of reality finally outpaced our cognitive ability to write fiction about the future?
The traditional function of science fiction was to imagine the impossible, so that society could mentally simulate and prepare for the structural shock.
Like a practice run for society.
Exactly. But when the impossible becomes the literal daily news cycle, the utility of the genre fractures, it can no longer reliably predict what will happen because the technological baseline is shifting faster than the publication cycle of a novel.
By the time the book is printed, it's outdated.
Reality hasn't necessarily outpaced our imagination, but the velocity of structural change has severely outpaced our cultural processing speed. We are living inside the event horizon.
We are entirely inside the innermost loop.
We are. And this raises one final critical question for you to ponder as we conclude.
Let's hear it.
If artificial intelligence is successfully managing the flow of our highways, executing our software engineering, and cracking the absolute mathematical foundations of our universe, and if solid-state batteries are about to unlock limitless physical energy density, what happens to the fundamental human necessity for struggle?
That's a deep question.
As a species, we have evolved entirely around the mandate to solve complex survival problems. When all the entry-level problems in mathematics, biology, logistics, and resource allocation are seamlessly solved by autonomous machines, what becomes of us?
Are we just along for the ride?
Do we atrophy into the pampered, managed pets of our own technological infrastructure? Or, by successfully offloading the mundane, grinding struggle of basic survival, do we finally grant ourselves the complete freedom and the vast mental bandwidth required to tackle cosmic questions we haven't even possessed the capacity to invent yet?
The outro music is by Rainbow, our resident 6 Android girl band from near-future Bavet, Cambodia. They are the undisputed baddest band in the universe, and today's song is called Apollo Aftermath. All finished songs are performed live using the Abacus platform by the band's creator, Human Performance in the Age of AI, reclaiming your humanity from the algorithm. Be sure to share the playlist with someone who has the mental bandwidth to absorb these provocative ideas. Links are in the description below. Enjoy the music. Thanks for tuning in.